Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts, Whiskey and Sweet Tea, discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. In honor of Dia de los Muertos, we will be discussing Jorge Gutierrez's animated film, The Book of Life. Please be advised, spoilers are ahead. Hey everybody, welcome back to another crisp and delicious episode. Or refreshing because we're beverages.
First episode after Schlocktober. We're here on the Dia de los Muertos.
The Day of the Dead, for those of you who don't speak foreign languages. See. But this is the first time Whiskey's ever really seen this movie, I think, right? You haven't seen this before, have you?
So this came out, I remember when it came out, it looked pretty cool. I know one of your favorite filmmakers is involved producing-wise, and that's what got me into it, but I don't know if it didn't really bomb when I looked at the numbers, so I guess it was just a limited release. It came and went, so I never got a chance to see it.
It made double its budget. That's pretty much it.
No, exactly. I looked up the numbers. It didn't do super well in the U.S., but I guess it was just a limited release because I wanted to see it, but it was gone by the time I could have seen it.
I remember because I didn't see this in theaters, but I remember seeing commercials and stuff and it being at least in my area, which would make sense because there's a very huge Hispanic population in my hometown. But you're right. I don't think it was as wide a release as most animated films are, which that'll kind of play into something later that I'll bring up. But
I will also say I don't think the trailer did the movie justice because it was very by the numbers kids movie kind of, with pop music playing in the background and because I remember I wanted to see it because Guillermo del Toro produced it. But I remember seeing the trailer and being I'll go in good faith. And that's the thing. So
so for people who haven't seen this movie, it is essentially, it is a pre-Coco. I'm going to say pre-Coco.
That's the big comparison.
That's the big comparison. And I actually have a bone to pick about that. And I'll share an experience about that later. But so it is, a Day of the Dead, it's not really focused on the specific Day of the Dead in particular, but it plays a lot into that mythology and culture that is very prevalent in Mexican society and Mexican culture of the fact that there is, a connection that the living has with the dead and, your family and those who come before you. At its core, it's a love story between two characters, it's a love triangle, really, between three characters, Maria, Manolo, and Joaquin. And Joaquin and Manolo are essentially fighting for the affections of the character of Maria, which I really like, and I'll explain why I like that later.
I like that Joaquin and Manolo are, Joaquin is not just a straight up jerk. That's something I actually was surprised to find when we watched it. I like how the three of them are best friends.
Yeah.
So it's
but they're not trying to go out there and sabotage each other.
I was a little bit, but more outdo each other than sabotage. Yeah. If that was the thing, I was expecting Joaquin to be a Gaston kind of person, and he's not. Right. He does actually. He's
more complex of a character. He's not two dimensional as far as just being a villain. And that's one thing to do appreciate this about the fact that this movie has a lot of gray areas. But they're vying for these affections. Underworld creatures get involved and make a wager on them, which reminds me a lot of, if you're a Christian and you have read the Bible, which a lot of people haven't, the book of Job is kind of similar, where it's a wager on a mortal between two overarching deities. And in that case, it's between Satan and God as to if Job will remain loyal to God if his life basically sucks. And or
if you just like literature, it's Faustian too.
Yeah, that's too. But it's that's really cool because you kind of get to understand, the dichotomy between not necessarily good and evil, but, it's not really, if you look at it religiously, it's not really good and evil because it's not heaven and hell. It's being remembered or being forgotten, which is a big part of Mexican culture. You really do keep your family and those who come before you in mind when you are doing things. So they get involved.
I like the dynamic between the two elder gods because they're kind of
La Muerte, and I always forget what his other name is, but he's voiced by Hellboy.
Ron Perlman.
Yes, thank you.
And I like that they're like a couple, kind of.
It's so cute.
It is very cute. I like that. It's cool.
very yin and yang.
I don't know how accurate that is to the real mythology, but it was very cute to have like the two gods like not just be like rivals, but also be like lovers. That was cute. So I mean, how accurate is that to the myth? Like that's the thing. I've always liked the Day of the Dead, but I it's not my culture, so I never got to celebrate it. So I know about it just through the media. Like every time there was like a Hispanic character like in shows I liked or whatever, they would talk about the Day of the Dead.
Yeah,
and
it's a very, very big day, and it's hilarious that people, at least not to call anybody out, but specifically Caucasian individuals, get really excited about Cinco de Mayo, when in Mexico it's basically just like Arbor Day. Yeah, it's not Arbor Day, but it's not a big deal.
Hey, white people will come up with any excuse to drink all day. It's what we do best. So
as far as now, I'm not from Mexico, and my family, they are a little separated from the main tradition, so I don't have a in-depth knowledge of the day that I can't be like your expert. However, I do know, I believe if I remember correctly, the two gods are part of the whole folklore. They are not, however, if I remember correctly, they are not in some sort of romantic,
that is disappointing.
Liaison, but it works with the story.
I like that. Because La Muerte, it's death. Yeah. So I like that. Essentially, like at least according, I don't know how accurate, but at least according to the way the culture is depicted in this movie, death is like a very nice lady.
Yeah, death. In Mexican culture, and this actually plays into, actually wanted to bring this up, Mexican culture, death really isn't brought up as something to be feared. It's kind of more thought of as another stop on your journey of life. And if you've ever heard Guillermo speak, actually during I think it was during a Shape of Water press tour or for his academy, with some reporter, and I believe they were white, asked them, why do you make all these these dark and with these weird and creepy and unsettling things, and still come out smelling like a bed of roses, and he was just like, I'm Mexican, No, and that is totally true.
That one of the lines I actually thought was kind of funny in this. One of the kids, because there's a framing device which I'm not typically a big fan of, but it's done well in this movie, is that it's kids going on a field trip, and they're learning this story at a museum by one of the tour guides. And one of the kids at one point in the story says, "Why are Mexicans so obsessed with death?"
I know.
And I loved it. I was like, it's so true. It's
Sorry, by the way, I just double checked. His name is Xibalba.
Zabalba. That's right.
So he's the other. So if I remember correctly, they are both important. I don't believe they are in a relationship. La Muerte, as far as I know, is always usually depicted as a female, because
she seems nice.
She's chill, but like that's a big thing. But death is not something to be feared or to be terrified of. And if you really you watch this movie, that death is sort of something that a lot of people will be like, "Oh, that's so dark," and it's kind of just like a thing. The one that I remember the most, it's most shocking, is when Manolo's father is like, "I'll buy you time," and it's like defending the town, and it's just like it cuts the afterlife. He just pops up. Like the idea is that he was just brutally murdered by this guy, but like the fact they're just like, "Oh, hey, family, what up?" It's something that it's like most people, and I feel like a lot of Western culture, not Western cultures, a lot of I don't want to like bash on white people. I just feel like in like especially a U.S. audience would find that to be a very, very dark sort of thing that's being made light of, and but it kind of just plays into this idea that death isn't something that's really feared in this culture, in my culture, in that culture. And so I do really like that they are able to make that. Just that very obvious about what the attitude of death is. Were you going to say something?
Well, so obviously going into this, it's going to get compared to Coco because Coco is a giant international hit.
The Book of Life came first, people.
Well, technically, the mythology came first. Anyone can make a Day of the Dead movie. Okay. But that's the thing. Like, I gotta ask, what's the bone you have to pick with Coco? Because I love knocking Disney down a peg, and I love rooting, especially with animation, for the underdog. But like going into this, I gotta be fair.
So
I'm curious what.
So the thing I was mentioning is an experience I had when Coco was coming out. I do have some other things I want to bring up as I discuss, things I like about the movie. I do personally, full disclosure, think this is the better of the two films. But I remember when I was actually interning in Hollywood at a production company. And the people, they're very nice. They're very, very good people, and I don't think they have anything by it. But it bothered me that when they'd announced Coco was coming out and kind of what it was going to be about, there was an executive. She was, white. She was like, well, I saw Book of Life, and it was, it was kind of okay. I mean, I actually don't even know if even at the time they'd even said what Coco was about. They just kind of said it was going to be a Mexican-centered story. But it really bugged me that she was already drawing a comparison to this as though, having a Mexican-centered or Hispanic-centered story is like, it's something that we can try it, but it doesn't work. It was the way she said it just bugged me that she was already willing to write off Coco because she didn't particularly like this one. It's like, well, that's like if I were to like
write off the Book of Life because of Coco.
No, because Book of Life came first. She'd seen the Book of Life. Coco,
she was saying that Coco isn't going to be as good because of the Book of Life. She was thinking like Coco wasn't going to be popular because of the Book of.
She was already kind of just like, well, the Book of Life wasn't that good. It's just
that's something
and I know her. She's not a person that would be like, that's a very kind of racist thing to say.
I'm not gonna say that, but I am gonna say something that is almost laughable with a lot of executives in this industry is it's never the movie's fault. It's always what the movie is about.
Yeah.
Or the star. Like, it's never that the movie is bad.
Yeah.
It's that, which it wasn't. I will get into my opinion on this movie, but it's not bad at all. It's actually quite good. But I do find it funny. It's like, if one movie about the Day of the Dead doesn't do well, that means the Day of the Dead is a bad subject for a movie. Well, and that's like the way a lot of executives think, and it's just funny because it's like, maybe if you're like more critical and actually think about what didn't resonate with audiences.
Yeah.
Because I have an opinion.
Also, I don't even think at this point they'd even announced what the movie was going to focus on. I think they just said it was going to be
the original trailer. I could tell it was the Day of the Dead. Well, no, just from the trailer. I don't know about.
I don't think this was. This is just before, they had announced the project. They just said it was I think they just said it was a Mexican or Hispanic themed piece.
Gotcha.
Called Coco, to be produced by Pixar, and the fact that she was already kind of just like that always rubbed me the wrong way, and so. The fact that conversation took place always really bugged me. And like I said, she's not a bad person. She's not like, it was just that mentality that as though like a culture is, a theme we can try out once. And if it doesn't work, there was just something just so dismissive about it that really, really bugged me.
Well, going off of, there's a couple of bones to pick with Coco, it sounds like. Why would you say that Coco is not as good as this movie?
I would say because this movie, now both these movies are made with a very Hispanic heavy production crew. The animators, the writers of the story, they're all so that's not the issue. I do think though is at least with Coco is very rose tinted as far as the way it looks at a lot of the culture. And what I like about the Book of Life was also produced by a heavily Hispanic crew and your writers, directors, all that. But it's introspective and it does take the time to acknowledge the problems that do exist within not necessarily the concept of Day of the Dead, whether or not you believe in that or not, but also the culture as a whole. It does take the time to point out the problems, not necessarily just with Day of the Dead, whether or not you believe in that, that's not really what it's, but it also kind of points out the flaws and the problems that permeates a lot of Hispanic culture that are now post Me Too are starting to be addressed.
Elaborate, please.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious because I didn't really.
So first off, I'm kind of just go into like how things I like about this. What I really like this is you talk about the framing device. Which you're normally not a fan of, but it works. I really like it in this case.
It's part of the reason it works is because they do it in like 5 minutes and. The big reason I think it was really cool is they have little wooden people for so when they're telling the story, it's all done with like this stylized, almost like it's like a bunch of toys come to life.
Yeah, exactly.
That is awesome. Like after that, I'm like, okay, I don't care anymore. I don't care that there's no reason necessarily. It's also like unclear if the museum is in Mexico or if it's about Mexico, because they're like, this is about Mexico, and it's like, well, wait a second, is this?
They don't really say in the movie. If you read anything about it online, they always refer to it as a group of young Mexican students.
Okay.
So I assume
so it's supposed to.
So I assume it just takes place, especially with at the end when they say Mexico is the center of the universe. I think it's in Mexico.
The reason I found that unclear was because they're like referring to Mexico as if it's like some other place. The way they're talking about it.
Yeah.
That was just me. I assumed it was Mexico, that like it took place in Mexico. But anyway, it was.
So I'm just gonna kind of go into kind of how I feel about it, and I'll address my issues that with Coco as I go into it. So one of the things I really like about that framing device is this really does. There always is, and you'll see this a lot with a lot of cultures. Asian cultures, Black culture, that as we progress, we kind of lose the idea of where we've come from. And I really like that this does come across as very much, we want to educate you, but in a non-preachy way about the culture, instead of just implying that we already know everything about it. I really, really do appreciate that approach because, like I said, I was raised in Mexican culture. We weren't I don't know the ins and out of every single thing ever. So as a Latino, that to me, I really enjoyed that. I didn't feel like I was being talked down to, but I was still being educated. So I really like that. So what I do like about this is there's that concept of, and it is echoed in Coco. However, it is different in the way it's echoed. The concept of, they talk about writing the book of life, and your story is blank, which means you're writing your own story because it's not matching up with what's on here. If you really think about Day of the Dead, it is very common, and it's probably one of the most important parts of it, is you go and you visit your ancestors' cemeteries. You go and you decorate the graves. You leave offerings. Of course you have your home ofrendas to display your family's pictures on. But if you really think about it, a lot of what that does sort of discourage mobility in life and leaving behind, your village or your small town, or it basically kind of encourages you to become stagnant and basically
stay in your hometown.
Stay in your hometown whole life. Don't move on, because if you don't, you can't take part in all that. But and Coco doesn't. Coco talks about striking out, doing your own thing, but they don't really kind of address this idea of leaving and moving on. If you think about it,
you're not wrong. I'm just kind of curious because
they wanted her to marry. They wanted Maria to marry Joaquin, and even though she kind of really didn't want to, because it's what's best for the town. And it's sort of that thing. It's sort of that whole idea.
I see what you're saying, because at least as far as the argument about this movie does not really argue against leaving your town either, or it doesn't make a point about that. But I know what you mean about what's best for the town. But don't really. The thing is,
it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't.
Manolo would have stayed in town too.
He would have stayed in town too, but for different reasons, not because it's what was best for the town, but because it's what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And Maria, as you can see, she went out. Of course, she was sent away because she was wild. But she came back with all this outside knowledge that actually ends up benefiting, the town. But that's not something they see. They only see really what they already know, and this is what's best for the town to do this. And whether or not, I do think the movie makes the case that does make an argument that this is a problem that we see occur in the culture, but the fact that it's even kind of addressed at all is something that I didn't see happen in Coco. Now, of course, Coco took place in a major metropolitan. I believe I want to say it's Mexico. 60s. Yeah, no, I want to say it's Mexico City. It's a major metropolitan area.
I also don't think Coco was really interesting, because one is a love triangle, the other is a little boy who wants to be a musician. So I don't. You're not wrong. I just don't think that it's a sort of. It wouldn't have gotten addressed in the story unless they went out of their way to you know what I mean, I mean, there were ways that it could have been brought up. For example, it's not that they wanted him to be a musician in Coco. They wanted him to be a musician and work, and not to be a musician and work in the factory. They wanted him to stay and keep the business going. It was implied that he would kind of just stay there and continue the whole thing at the family compound in the city. And so I do think they could have been brought in that way, and it wasn't. It was kind of just more played of, my family doesn't understand that, or they're afraid of music. Both stories, the families are hilariously unable to like grasp any kind of nuance. In Coco, I found it funny. It's like you can't. I understand like the fairy tale logic of the musician ruined our family, so music is outlawed. But like the idea of you can't be a shoemaker and a musician at the same time, and it's the same thing in the Book of Life with the matador thing. Mm-hmm. It's like you can't be a musician and a matador. Why not? Yeah. Like, that was something I thought was funny and kind of ironically very similar to Coco. And same thing, like, I agree with you, because I didn't pick up on the town and, like, the keeping your roots in one place as much, but the bullfighting is a very controversial thing, and I thought that was definitely kind of criticizing the culture a little bit, because... You know, bullfighting it's pretty cruel. Even as cool as like it is to like do that thing. Like if you've actually seen a bullfight, it's pretty brutal.
They're pretty brutal, yeah.
So like that was an interesting. For me, I felt like that was more of an on the nose.
That was obviously a very on the nose thing. But again, that's something that's taking a step further. Coco wouldn't have really dared to have any sort of critique against thing that could be perceived as Mexican or Hispanic.
Well, plus bullfighting's more like Book of Life takes place long before Coco, because bullfighting's not really a Mexican thing; it's a Span. Yeah, it's from Spain. So like, I'm sure bullfighting exists in Mexico, but it's not as big of a thing as it is.
The thing that people understand about when people are like, oh, there is a difference between Mexican and Spanish. However, Mexican people come from when Spanish people came over and mated with
that's actually
with the native peoples of the land that we now know as Mexico, and that's where Mexicans come from. So there is a connection.
It makes me wish I had done more research into mythology, because Zabalba is the name of the god of the forgotten. The Aztecs had a god, Zabalba, that they would sacrifice people to. So it makes you wonder if it's just the merging of the two, La Muerte and Zabalba. So instead of
it really is a lot of sort of. If you really like look and you analyze stuff, a lot of Aztec culture ended up not. You look at it now and you're like, this is nasty. A lot of it ended up being woven into and influencing. For example, if you look at like in Louisiana, a lot of French, because it used to be part of France, a lot of French culture got interwoven into Cajun culture, or it got mixed with Creole culture, and that became Cajun culture.
It's interesting that so there was Britain, which came to the United States area. There were the French who went to Canada, and Spain went to South America and Mexico, and they all had like different ideas of how to incorporate their like. America, we all know what happened. It was not a good. I say America, United States. We know what happened. We were probably the worst, second worst. Spain. Like, it's not just about intermarrying. There was a little bit of force put on it.
But the point is they came from Spanish
people. So there's that, and then the French were like weird. They kind of like just became like fur traders, and then Canada, in my opinion, has the most interesting history as far as like settling.
My favorite thing is we went over and tried to take over Niagara Falls. We thought it was Manifest Destiny, the Canadian side, and we slaughtered a bunch of people. It's really sad. So they one-upped it and came and burned down our capital. We never tried invading it, which is why Canada, the Horseshoe Falls, is completely owned by Canada.
Yep. And
our falls are lame.
War of 1812.
You can't even see the U.S. falls from the U.S. side.
But anyway, so what are some of the other things that you
that was one of them. The other one I really, really do appreciate about this movie is this movie's analysis and critique of machismo culture, which is a very, very big part of, at least for males in the Hispanic world, the whole idea of that you have to be a man's man, and you have to, like, they talk about that's a Sanchez man. That's what he, and it was the fact that they made Joaquin. He's the very, very macho, and then we have Manolo, who is the very more sensitive one, and the fact that you really kind of put those two against each other. So you could really see the difference. The fact that they, one, called that out, two, illustrated it, and three, had the more sensitive guy come out on top. to me, that's a huge step as far as the acceptance of people and the way that they they choose to express their gender and their identity, which is a problem.
I will say, culture. As far as Coco goes, the most machismo character in the movie is the villain. So I will say that much.
Well, that's true, but I feel like the problem wasn't that he was sensitive and played music. It was the fact that he was just a jerk. I mean, the fact that he...
But that plays into his machismo, because when you go to the actual musician, he's the much more quiet, sensitive one who wanted to return to his family.
But he doesn't have what's considered, at least in the culture, as feminine qualities. The sensitivity, this unwilling to kill, that...
Yeah, he does. What are you talking about?
Well, no, it's because what I'm trying to say is there really isn't... They don't. So that's never like a plot point in Coco, but saying just because he never says like I would never kill a bull. Again, like first of all, I will say in my opinion, these movies aren't entirely comparable, other than the fact that they're both related to the Day of the Dead, and they both have to do with musicians and being unaccepted by their family.
Yes.
And but a journey through the underworld.
But the devil's in the details, T. And the thing is, like, again, like if you take the character of the boy's like actual ancestor, like he's not feminine, but he's not traditionally masculine. He's a lot shorter stature than the villain in the movie. He's that one who actually writes the music and is that sensitive, and he's the one who wants to return to see his daughter because his family is more important to him than his career. So, right. There's not really like a critique of machismo in Coco, but I will just say that the De La Cruz, he's like the most macho guy in the movie.
I will agree with that. I do think Coco had the opportunity to really call out this problematic aspect of Mexican culture and chose not to, and chose to play it safer and just kind of create more of a movie that just sort of just kind of just celebrates it as it's there's a difference between when you are bringing a culture to the forefront like this. It's very, very difficult to do that and not kind of point out, maybe there's some stuff about it that's wrong. And a lot of people are now coming to realize the whole idea of the machismo individual, which I still have cousins who struggle with this, even though they are some of the most liberal people I know. They still struggle with this. People are realizing how much of a problem that is, and the fact that Coco had the opportunity to do that, and it's made by Hispanic people who know and understand, how damaging that could be, and they had plot points they could have, and the fact they didn't, I think that was Disney trying to not stir the pot as far as, let's just make it more of a celebration as opposed to,
it's possible.
To me, I feel like Book of Life is more self-introspective of the whole idea of the culture. It's not the end all be all on every little aspect of it, but it does try to at least tackle some of the big problems.
Gotcha.
And do it in a good way. And I feel like Coco could have done that, but it may have in earlier drafts, but I do feel like Disney did kind of step in and be like, ooh, that's a little critical. We don't want to be seen as hating on it.
That's true. I also think, especially in the country that we live in, it's a little, once you start nitpicking certain things, it gives people with certain prejudices fuel to use that as, talking points that the culture is inferior to their own.
Yeah.
So I don't think Disney's necessarily like not addressing it or something like that. But what are some of the other things you think is introspective? Because I do want to get into what I think in a second, but I am curious, like, what other things do you think they kind of critique in Hispanic culture?
So what this isn't like more of a critique, but this is what I like about, to me, this is what makes this movie feel real. They didn't feel the need to include stereotypes that Caucasians are familiar with. To say, oh, this is a Mexican movie. The biggest one, and I see this literally in every single piece of media that is produced now, that involves Hispanic people. There's always this thing about the mother, it's called the chancla, hitting her child with her shoe. That is a thing that happens.
That is definitely in Coco.
That's in Coco. That's in basically any piece of media I've seen recently that involves Hispanic people. And the fact they didn't feel the need to include that to get a few cheap laughs
There's some cheap laughs.
There are some cheap laughs, but it's not at the expense of the culture.
No, absolutely. You definitely got me there. There's some shoe hitting in Coco for sure.
But it's just like, it's stuff like that I'm just like, did we really need to pull out this stereotype to make this? And I do kind of feel like that's one of the reasons why this was left to sort of not as huge a release as like Coco was, because it was backed by a big studio. 20th Century Fox is a big studio. It originally was at DreamWorks, but they left due to creative differences. I'm willing to bet that's because they wanted to make some of these changes to make it more palatable to everybody, which I'm glad that Fox didn't do. But I do think because they didn't do that, I think that's why Fox kept it as sort of kind of a mini release. But to me, this movie, just in the way, in its portrayal of culture and its portrayal of the Mexican identity, is much more authentic than Coco is. Because to me, Coco kind of really, they pull out, they really try. I'm not going to really, just like be a big downer all, because that was a milestone movie as far as a big deal for this, for my culture to be seen in this light, in this big budget studio thing.
A lot of people in the culture liked Coco.
Yeah, they do. And obviously I do not, it's not that I'm saying I hate Coco. I'm just saying, of the two movies, if we're going to sit here and start comparing them, Book of Life, I think, was much more positive, not because it was, a very, Mexican culture is so great, but because it is willing to look at itself and be like, these are some problematic elements of this movie. Of this culture that we need to build on. Well,
I think I'm going to get into my opinion of this, which is that it is an excellent movie. Especially animation, A+. I think it's on par with Coco, which is shocking considering the budget. Story is an A. The moral of like being yourself is A+. And so the budget was only $50 million. And I'm comparing to Coco again. Like, this is a movie I feel like everyone's going to compare to Coco. So $50 million for this movie. Coco had $175 million because Disney has unlimited resources, and that's part of the reason I really, really, really wanted to agree with you about liking this more than Coco. And also, I'm gonna shout out the director Jorge R. Gutierrez. Has done a lot of work on like Mexican cartoons for like Cartoon Network and some other things. A lot of like goofy sort of, like, you can look it up. It's but his background's in a lot more like kind of short form, silly sort of cartoons. So it was really cool seeing.
He also is great to follow on Instagram.
Yeah, and so this was nominated for a Golden Globe and 3 other awards.
And I was going to bring that up. I'm actually, when I looked at what was nominated for Best Animated Film that year, I was like, seriously, I don't know how this got left out of Best Animated Film but I was like, well, maybe it was too small, but then they had 2 other films that were up that year that I'd never even heard of for Best Animated Feature.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up because I know that it was nominated for some things, but
it wasn't nominated
for an Oscar.
It didn't get any Oscar nominations at all.
Yeah, which is shocking to me because I think it should have at least gotten the nomination. I don't know what else was nominated for an Oscar.
That was the year of Big Hero 6. I don't know if that's what won, but that's the year that was nominated.
That's a pretty good one. So anyway, my problem with this film is that it suffers from a blight on the animated film industry that you see in a lot of lesser projects. Something that just irritates the heck out of me, and I have to knock it down a peg for one thing, referential humor to pop culture. There's parts where Joaquin says, "Come at me, bro." I normally don't take my notes while watching a movie, but during this, it got so irritating that I just paused the movie and got my notes out. The weird part is it cut this crap out about halfway through the movie. Like, so the first half of the movie is just loaded with this stuff, and then it just stopped. But I made a few notes here. So for the pop culture references, there's when Joaquin says, "Come at me, bro." There's this goes into later point too, but there's that "Just a Friend" song by Biz Markie. You got what I need. irritating for me anyway. Like, and also I don't think kids would really get the reference. That was the other thing about both of these. Like, I know this came out in 2014, but every time there was like a pop culture reference, it felt really dated even for 2014. Mm-hmm. Sadly, like 20th Century Fox does this. Like, I really wanted to like the movie Ferdinand from a few years ago.
I still need to see that. I love the book as a kid.
It is worse than this movie as far as pop culture references, to the point where like it's in a lot of things. Like, you'll see like a kids movie and then the characters will be like doing the floss dance from 2018, and it's like, wow, you're dating yourself really badly. And it annoyed me that this movie did this, because it's like it holds it back, you know. Mm-hmm. Like, in good like animated films for kids, they don't feel the need to like reference things that their parents will get, or, you know, like it doesn't rely on that sort of humor, really. Like, you know, even in Coco, I'm trying to think of like
you're right. I don't think in Coco there really is any like pop culture, but I do know in other Disney animated films it doesn't seem as obvious, because
I think you're thinking of DreamWorks. Disney doesn't sink to it as frequently.
Disney will reference itself a lot.
Yes.
So, like, but to me, because Disney's so modern pop culture, it's kind of the same thing. But the fact is, they can do it because
they can do it because it's their own.
It's their own thing, and it's less obnoxious. But so I'm saying, I guess I'm saying is, I can kind of understand your annoyance. To me, that's not much of a deal breaker.
I'm annoyed because I wanted to say this is better than Coco. Anytime there's like a smaller animated film, I want it to beat Disney at the Oscars, because Disney wins every year and it has unlimited resources and it's practically a monopoly at this point.
I told you, so this is why I think they should wait 5 years
to love this movie more than Coco, but that's problem number one. Problem number two, and this kind of is something that is directly related with Coco, and I will give this movie credit because it does not have unlimited resources, but it had non-original music for a vast majority of it. Thankfully, by the end of the movie, they did actually write a song. It's the one you hear at the very end, and it plays during the end credits. They did write that song for the movie, and same thing for when he's, you know, singing to the ball. Exactly. Other than that, reliance on pop music, you've got I Will Wait For You by Mumford & Sons, Creep by Radiohead, which was cringy, I gotta say. The bit where he's like, oh, no one understands me, so he sings Creep by Radiohead. That was a literal cringy moment, and
I know I'd heard that song. I didn't know where I'd heard it from, though.
It is not. No, I will say the funny, only it's the not one clever. It is a joke that is 20 years old. But here's my thing, Coco, and this is where again they have unlimited resources, but it is a movie about music where every single song was written for the movie.
Right
now, I know that this movie didn't have the money, but you have to pay to license these songs.
Well, and with 20th Century Fox, they may have already had licenses for some of these songs.
Fair enough, I guess. But like the thing is, it kills it for me, especially in a movie where it's music centric. And if I'm being objective and I'm looking for things to knock, the pop culture references were the thing that irritated me, but the music. Especially like when the story is about him coming out of his shell and being his own person, and the two songs that were written specifically for the movie were at the end of the movie. It's like maybe the first time he sings in the movie could be when he's serenading the bull,
or it could be a story, or like you said, if it's about coming out of his shell and becoming his own person. Those are the only two times he really sings.
That's what I mean. Music. That's what I mean. For the whole movie, he doesn't sing until the end.
But I mean, maybe that was the point. That's why all the music before that.
I don't think it was. I think it was.
I give Jorge some credit on that.
I don't think that was the intention. And the thing is, like, the music was good. It's just I gotta knock it points for that. And it's.
I will say the original songs, though, to me feel a little more heartfelt and less, you know, like heavily, you know, scrutinized and had executives poured over it. That the music from Coco is still good. It's still good. But
I didn't say that there's like
no. I know the music from Coco is still good. But my issue with like the two original songs in the movie of this movie, I personally feel like they are much more authentic than the ones in Coco are.
Oh, dude, Remember Me?
Remember
Me. I'm sorry.
Remember Me is a great song, but it does feel a little too polished for my taste. For something that's supposed to be emotionally vulnerable, it does feel really. It just feel incredibly polished.
Possibly.
Which, that's good and bad.
Like, when you get down to which songs are better, that's just a subjective opinion.
Yeah, that is a subjective thing.
And that's the thing. Again, like, this is less about crapping on this movie and more of just me ranting so that this stops happening in kids, like, animated movies, because maybe we'll review Ferdinand and you can get a better idea of why it just irritates me.
Well, what's interesting
when they feel the need to stoop to the level of what's popular now, dabbing? Okay, let's have the characters dab on the haters. It's like, or doing the floss dance.
Okay, the floss dance. We're talking about
stupid. But you see what I mean. It's like, it's just don't date your movie.
I guess the reason why, and I think we've had a discussion before about pop culture references. The reasons why, and it goes back to the type of TV shows that you and I watch. Whiskey, what is my favorite TV show in the world?
Golden Girls.
Exactly. And that has a lot of pop culture humor. Again, it's smarter, it's well done, because it's not just, well, what's popular, let's throw this in here. It's people making commentary about things that are happening and just drawing from current, relevant situations.
And that's fine, but that's not what this movie
exactly
did.
Exactly, but I'm saying because of that, I can be a little more forgiving of when they show up. Now, when it's as obnoxious as, okay, they scored a goal, let's throw a floss dance in there. Yeah, that's a little obnoxious.
And that's why I am annoyed, because this keeps happening with companies that are trying to compete with Disney. They feel the need, like they have to, oh, well, we're not going to beat Disney. Let's, like, appeal to kids. What are they? Are they into Fortnite? What are, it's just like whatever is popular, they throw it in there because they think it will help their numbers, and it never does. This movie didn't even make, like, the Coco, $800 million. The
Coco was also a wide release, too.
So was this. This was
this was a wide release.
Well, internationally it was.
Well, I know international. Okay.
So internationally, in the U.S., this only made its budget back.
Yeah.
Internationally, it made $90 million.
Yeah.
That's the thing, guys. It doesn't help you to just, like. Again, this rant is less about this movie, and just stop doing this. Because you're only hurting yourselves, and it will only in the future, when people are looking back at what movies were coming out, it's just going to hurt you. And even with a movie like Shrek, which also had no original music, it had tons of pop culture references. Like, I still will not, even though that won the Academy Award for Best Animated that year, I will still hold it against it, because it just, it hurts it, Shrek could have been a better movie if the jokes were a little bit less about.
Shrek is also recognized by the AFI as one of the greatest animated films of all time,
and that's why I'm saying I'm not biased. I'm just saying that it is something you shouldn't rely on. Because the other thing about Shrek, the pop culture references haven't aged as poorly, because part of the reason
they feel more natural.
Well, it also was like an anti-Disney movie. Yeah. It was making fun of Disney movies. So when it's referencing Disney, it's almost kind of like a middle finger. So, like, that's that's part of the reason Shrek gets a pass. But if I'm just judging,
Lord Farquaad was supposed to be some executive at Disney.
He was supposed to be Michael Eisner, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is rich coming from... Anyway, like, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, like, that's just something that just gets on my nerves, and I feel like it's out of control nowadays with movies that are trying to compete with Disney, and they think, like, oh, just throwing in as many cheap laughs as possible is, going to help their case. And it rarely happens. And with this movie, especially, like, with the music, it's just really disappointing that they didn't come up with a more clever way to, like, if they couldn't afford to write several songs, it's like, again,
I'm sorry. I will still believe that that what I said earlier is the reason why the songs towards the beginning are unoriginal, and the ones towards the end are the two original songs.
It's possible
because those are the only two times he, as his guitar says, performs from his heart.
It's entirely possible. I just don't.
You were just irritated by it.
Well, again, all of this is front loaded, because the pop culture references and the cover songs are within the first 30 minutes. Then nothing. Mm-hmm. And then the end, like, it almost makes me wonder if it was a studio decision.
That's the time it could have been a studio decision.
It just feels weird. Again, I got out my notes because it was happening so frequently. I thought I was going to have to like list it for the entire runtime.
You're like, luckily it's
and
not.
then at like the 35 to 40 minute mark, there was just nothing. No pop culture references, no cover songs, nothing. And then the very end, it was like, you know, oh, cool, original music, you know, and I had to look, the very, very end song sounded like a pop song, so I had to look it up, and I did, and it was an original song. So, but anyway, it's like, it just irritates me, because I wanted this to be better than Coco.
I still think it is.
I think production quality, it is equal to Coco, and I think that this movie didn't get a fair shake, and I don't
think it got a fair shake, but I also do, what I do like about this movie is this doesn't feel like a manufactured it doesn't feel like a manufactured product to appeal to, okay, well, diversity's big right now, let's make a Hispanic film.
No,
like, and I do feel
not
like
at all.
I do feel like Coco can kind of come across as just very, very manufactured, very, very, audience tested. I just feel like a lot of it just does come across as ingenuine.
And that's the thing, they call it corporate wokeness, or so, like there's like a term for it. What, like, it's the same thing like when companies make like a political tinted commercial to like piss off people, so that there's like
discussion about it.
They call it outrage marketing, but it's like where they intentionally try and piss one side off so that it gets a lot of negative press.
When Gillette did that commercial,
exactly.
where that father was teaching his transgender son how to shave,
and then Nike, and then it's a whole thing. But yeah, that's the problem with Disney being as big as it is it's hard, because that's the thing.
And again, this is not a slam on Coco, because Coco did wonders for diversity and inclusion, and
I think even like taking the politics out of it, like you talk about,
it's
like
still
movies that mean things to people.
It does, yeah, and that's
there are people who like cried at the end of that movie. I gotta say, Remember Me, I teared up a bit. So like, I think I like to invalidate the movie just because it didn't do things a certain way is unfair.
And that's not what I'm trying to do.
And that's where I'm trying to like just be as objective as possible. I think like objectively these movies are as good as one another. I think that Book of Life loses some points, unfortunately, for stupid jokes that aren't going to age well, and again, it's at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. I don't know why they decided to like have freaking Joaquin say "Come at me, bro."
Which I didn't even know that was a reference. I thought that was just a phrase.
It was like a meme in the early 2010s. You know, it was like a thing, like "Come at me, bro." Don't tase me, bro.
I just thought that was a thing people said. I didn't realize that originated as a meme. I did not know that.
It's a thing. Like one way to tell if it's a meme or a meme is do people say it now, or is it like do people
say that?
You say "Come at me, bro." I've never heard you say that. If it's something that will make someone laugh if you say it, like it's out of date, then it's probably a dead meme. But yeah, on the tier. Speaking of memes,
as we determined what the name for Understair Closets was, when it is in reference to Ghostwatch last month.
But so like, and speaking of memes, this is probably a dead meme. But a while ago, everyone was making tier lists for things.
I still enjoy those.
I like them too. So if this were like the animation tier list, this would still be in the top for me. It'd be like an A or a B. Mm-hmm. Like S is like Toy Story, or like, I don't know, or original Cinderella, or like even. And that's
I will say one of the things that's really good about this movie is that its storytelling aspects, to me, are very, very mature for the type of film that this is. It's a kids and family film. To me, it really do feel like I'm sort of watching, one of those, classic Oscar bait movies, the way the story's arranged and the way it's being told. I mean, obviously, it's for kids, so it's not, but, and I can always tell that because I have such bad ADD. It's like I sometimes I will like space out for like a second. And I'll be like, wait, what's going on now? Well, and it's like, and to me, the fact that they trusted, or at least, gave kids the benefit of the doubt enough to be like, you can handle a more mature, telling of a story than, what most people think you can. And that's something that I can really, really respect and get behind, is, not underestimating the intelligence of kids.
Absolutely. And I also liked, again, with the three of them being best friends, like I like that Joaquin has his own character arc.
Well, and also
he's a hero.
The badge of everlasting life, if you really think about it, is a metaphor for machismoism, because it's like, without it, what is he really? As we determine once he loses his once he loses his badge, it's like, oh.
I took it as he never had to work for anything. Because
that too.
Because he was invulnerable. He had superpowers essentially.
But here's the thing: he didn't have superpowers except for the fact that he couldn't die. But because he had that, he had the confidence enough to become this super fighter. But it's like, once he didn't have it, he didn't have that confidence anymore.
I hate to break the news to you, but not being able to die is a superpower.
Well, yeah, anyway, but I mean, it didn't give him like super strength. That's what I'm trying to say. Super strength or mad fighting skills. Like, he possessed all of that without the pin, but because he didn't have the pin that he knew would guarantee.
But because of the pin, he was able to learn how to do all of those things. When you have, because I agree with you about confidence, but that's the thing. It's like, Manolo learned how to do all of that.
Which, by the way, did anybody else start thinking about shoes the whole time?
But Manolo learned how to do that without, invulnerability, exactly. And so it taught him courage, and that was the thing anyway. Like with Joaquin, I like that he gives the badge to Manolo at the end, as like, you deserve this more than me, and you're the real hero, because as much as I'm going in there and I'm beating people up and stuff, like I'm a coward at heart. Because I never had the courage to like actually do this without the fear of death.
And exactly, and like I said, I do feel like that is that the badge symbolizes this persona that a lot of Hispanic men do put on of being super, macho about everything. But it's like, there's under that, what else is there? Because like I think you said, Joaquin, he knew how to do all this stuff. He didn't need the badge to be an awesome fighter, to fight back, to flex his strength. But he didn't have the confidence without it, because now he was like, oh, well, now I can die.
And that is true. But he had the badge all through learning that stuff. Because remember, he got the badge before he started military training.
Yeah,
and all that.
That's true. That is true.
So that's my thing, is like, if he didn't have the badge, would he have been able to actually get through boot camp and all that? And to me, it's questionable.
That's true. That is true. I guess the only point I'm making is just that he didn't need the badge at the end to fight back, but he didn't have the confidence because it wasn't there.
I feel you. But yeah, so despite everything I just said, I do recommend it, especially if you are a fan of cartoons. In my honesty, I do think Coco's better. However, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the culture, because this does delve into things that Coco didn't touch on, like the wax maker, the candle maker,
the candle maker, who was voiced by Ice Cube, which I was like, that's a random casting, because I haven't really seen him in anything in a long time.
Yeah, so like if you're more into it, you want to learn a little bit more about the culture, you like that animation style, because I will say, if Disney plagiarized anything, it was probably like kind of the glowy neon look of the
I will say though, because this came out like 4 years before Coco, I do think that Disney did sort of kind of lift the importance of music, the importance. I do think they lifted a lot of stuff from this.
It's hard to know, because sometimes movies can be in pre-production for a really long time. But I agree. I do think that unless this movie was in production like 10 years before it came out, like I do think that there was some influence from this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think you should seek it out if you like cartoons. If you need something for your kids to watch that's really interesting.
It has a great message, and it's very, very, and it's still very, very, even without you talk about with your pop culture, it's still a very powerful movie.
But yeah, I just had to rant about pop culture humor and using pop music in your movies for kids, because it's irritating at this point.
No, but The Book of Life, terrific movie. I recommends from both of us, right? Thumbs up.
Absolutely.
Thumbs up. Because I practiced at the beginning, I'm just going to go ahead and rattle this off. 2014, director Jorge Gutierrez, starring in the main role with Diego Luna as Manolo. We had Channing Tatum as Joaquin, Zoe Saldana as Maria, Ice Cube as the Candlemaker, and we had, some Hispanic sort of celebrities who were featured in it, as in Manolo's band. We had Cheech Marin, and we had Gabriel Iglesias. They were both members of that. And then we also had a cameo from Mr. Del Toro himself, and you will never guess who his cameo was.
Was it the now I gotta think. Was he Maria's dad?
He was not Maria's dad. He was.
I bet he was one of the Sanchez's, one of the matadors that had passed.
No. So okay, and so you'll be like, really, that was it? But okay, so do you remember when Manolo first comes into the afterlife and he meets that captain?
Oh,
he was not the captain. Do you remember when he was like, "Oh, I miss my dearly beloved life," and then she pops up for a second? He was the wife that pops up for a second and just I forget what he says, but he says something. Like, I was like, "No, I'm not ready yet." I was like, I knew he was one of the things there. But yeah, so go ahead, check this out. By 20th Century Fox. I actually, even though I own it, I purchased it for about $7 on Amazon to own, not even rent, to own. So it's not expensive to buy. But yeah, I would go ahead on this Day of the Dead, check it out, watch it. If you have Disney fatigue and you should want something else to watch, it's a fantastic movie to include, or include it as a viewing with Coco, because they're they're both very different stories and they both stand on their own.
What's a better song, No Matter Where You Are, or What's a better song, No Matter Where You Are or Remember Me? Let us know down in the comments. If you liked what you heard today, go ahead and click the subscribe button or the like button. Hit the bell if you want to hear more from us in the future. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Reels on the Rocks is a production of LaPrince Laboratories. It is edited by Pat Mars and produced by Alejandro Castillo, with original artwork by Asa Sparza. Follow us on Twitter @ReelsOnTheRocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.